I'm saying that our response to Iran was weak, far weaker than I actually anticipated, far weaker than I imagined, which is saying something because I wasn't expecting much. I wasn't expecting much from the administration. 3 Americans killed. I was not expecting this administration to engage in a level of strength because in engaging in a level of strength might be seen by the party, the Democratic Party, as too much support for Israel. It might be seen as, oh, you're now the warmongers, Biden administration. Besides, we're already calling you Genocide Joe because you won't stop Israel from actually stopping the terrorist threat that is Hamas, which is, of course, connected to Iran. And Iran is, of course, the ones that killed 3 Americans. You can tell me about all the fringe groups you want. This response didn't seem like much. This response seemed like a whole bunch of nothing. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. Major Mike Lyons joins us, retired United States Army. I'm gonna share a couple of things with you in a second, sir. But first, your take to the response from the United States military. We hit strategic targets. We hit with a precision, 125 plus precision, either strikes or precision munitions were utilized. That seems to be the focus of the administration. Was this a response that said, you kill Americans, we deal with you properly?
Well, Tony, thanks for having me. I thought it was a good first response. I don't think this is the last thing that we're going to do. I think it's part of now the new deterrence campaign to try to restore the balance back to where it should be, and that is, it should not be acceptable for these Shia militia groups to attack American forces that are there. So yeah, no, I think that 85 targets or so it was good. I mean, we telegraphed enough for the leaders to get out of town, and I think that should have been a better target. I mean, if we didn't get any of those leaders within the first 24 to 48 hours after they attacked Americans, it's likely we weren't going to get them. But I still think they're on our radar the second they come back into Iraq. Obviously, they're all in Iran right now, someplace, but they come back into Iraq, they should be targets. So no, I'm okay with how this has started. And I'd like to see it continue. I'd like to see, for example, a no-fly zone over Iraq. I'd like to see a more detailed campaign with regard to the situation.
A no-fly zone would require far more pressure from the United States and far more engagement in the area. So I think there'll be some people who disagree with you on that one, Major. Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army, West Point graduate. But there's the idea of, and you keep hearing this conversation about proportionality. Well, they killed 3 Americans, but we can't go overboard, right? You can't do too much. Can you describe this concept of proportionality and how very often politically it's utilized incorrectly?
Sure, and it just has to do with what the response has got to be. Let's say in kind, and in this case, we traded off the lives of 3 soldiers for a very significant amount of physical damage that took place. The Iraqis claim that there were 16 killed on their side. I mean, if you're on the other receiving side of this, obviously you think that you're at war with the United States. But from a proportionality perspective, it means, let's say, staying within this sandbox of Syria and Iraq. I think that any attacks inside of Iran would increase the level of attacks. And in some cases, disproportionality as a way of deterrence works. For Israel, for example, they are disproportionate normally with regard to how they respond. But in this case, the United States, both inside of now Yemen and inside of Iraq and Syria, has fundamentally increased the attack level just a little bit, but not to the point where it's disproportional of taking out, multiple sites, attacking into Iran and really increasing what was going on there. Hey, but Tony, one more thing about the no-fly zone. I don't say that lightly. I agree with you that, in the past, that seems to be politicians throwing around, let's put a no-fly zone over Iraq. And what I mean by that is we already control the airspace. We don't have we don't have to worry about SA-7s or 300s or missiles firing our defenses out. But we need must have a better control of what's flying there in those drones. And it looks like we didn't go after them before. This was an accident. As it turns out, the operators thought that the drone that hit the the site was a friendly drone. So that's my point about better no-fly zone, better area with regard to controlling the airspace there. That to me is the tragedy of this whole thing, is that
Well,
America.
they certainly did allow the drone in. They
Yeah,
mistook it for possibly one of ours. It
right,
doesn't change the fact that Americans were killed, and it was done
right.
by Iran. But I want to get back to this proportionality conversation, because people take proportionality as, well, they killed 3 of ours, so we have to take 3 of theirs. No, proportionality is supposed to be, how do you engage an operation to ensure the safety and security of your people and your nation? And then how do you address that operation with the proper amount of hardware and intel? So if the proper response is killing 100 members of the Iranian Guard, well, then that's the proper response. And then proportionality is ensuring that you deliver the proper amount of bombardment to make that objective come true. Not that it's 3 for 3. I think the number should be 3,000 for 3, but not everybody is on my side. Where does this administration see the idea of proper response?
Well, let's also kind of talk both proportionality and deterrence. So, for example, we already have a proportionate advantage over our enemy, just our equipment alone. From what you just said, I mean, we normally protect our forces. That to me was the greatest tragedy in this whole situation, is that we didn't protect our forces. And so normally, by everything we do, United States power and just the fact logistics. Look at that base, for example, in Jordan. It's got to be one of the most austere places on the planet. The fact that we can get in there and keep soldiers fed, watered, and work missions, and they're working with Syrian defense forces and doing lots of different things, just shows the level of U.S. superiority and might. But deterrence, I think that's what you're talking about. And because that's about consequences. That's about making sure that if you do something, that there's going to be such a grave consequence. So that's kind of where they go together, proportionality with deterrence. And again, we're not sure we're there yet. I think it's going to take time, whether the Shia militia groups know that there's going to be a greater consequence for attacking U.S. forces.
Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. Part of a response is to send the message of, don't do this again. And not only to those who engage the attack, but those who might be looking from the outside. As a matter of message being sent across borders, does this response tell anybody, ooh, the United States is serious? Or how many rounds would there have to be before people thought the United States was serious?
Well, I think we're waiting to see what's happening, right? What's happening back channel with Iran to the United States right now? What specifically is going on there? So, like for example, we saw the Shia militia groups now attack a Syrian group, a Syrian Defense Force group that's working with the United States in combating ISIS. And so, perhaps this is what the Shia militia groups are doing now. They're not going to necessarily go after U.S. forces. You saw KT Hezbollah basically say that they were going to cease military operations, but that's not to say they won't attack other groups that are aligned with Americans. Now, this goes to show maybe that the Iranians don't have any kind of say or sway over what those Shia militia groups are doing. I'm not trying to give any benefit of the doubt here, but the bottom line is that really might be the case. You know, these kinds of authoritarian governments don't control things that they would like to control. They have their own inside issues. They have their own challenges keeping the power as it may be. So I think that we're going to see a little bit of a pause here before I think more targets come to play. But I do believe those targets will be more the leadership when they start coming back to Iraq to try to lead some of these organizations.
Let me share some of this with you. This was Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, doing, of course, the Sunday shows. And we'll start with Face the Nation over there on CBS.
So the U.S. officially has not assessed that Tehran directed the attack, but has Tehran done anything to rein in the militias that they fund and arm?
Well, we know that Iran is behind these militia groups. They train them, they fund them, they arm them, as your question suggests. And they do have influence with them. And I can't sit here today and tell you that Tehran has shifted its policy. What I can tell you is what the United States' approach is going to be, which is that if we continue to see threats and attacks from these militia groups, we will respond to them and we will hold those responsible accountable.
let's start with the step one of this. There is no one seriously considering or engaged in a serious conversation that these groups aren't actually Iran, proxy militia groups, however you want to call it. This is Iran dictating the attack on American forces. No one's questioning that, are they?
I think they are. I think they're saying, dictating is one thing, and causation, correlation. Obviously, they've been funded, trained, and set up by the Iranian government. But whether they're actually saying, okay, here's the target set that you're going after, who knows? I think that we have to see if whether that's the case or not. If we can show proof for that, that's different through intel. But I don't think that is the case. I do believe that these Shia militia groups work off of intent, commander's intent, as we call it in the military. And what that means is, the Iranian government says, go do whatever you can to keep America on their toes and to try to harass and interdict as much as you can on American forces there. Now, who's to say that they've taken that a step too far? They say they send these one-way suicide drones. We don't know how many they've sent in the past. We've just intercepted them as well. So I think that's more or less what's happening here. I'm not saying that the Iranians are specifically giving them targets, but I'm saying they've given them the intent to do what they're doing.
So I want to make sure we were clear about that, because I certainly believe it's possible that the Iranians were giving targets. Your point is they're given basically a level of carte blanche, but it's still the Iranians making this happen. This isn't some rogue group making this rogue decision out there well out of bounds of what the Iranian authority is. The authority is, go get them, Tiger.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just an invisible hand. I'd give you that. It's by intent. They've given them all this equipment. They've given them the high sign, let's say. But the bottom line is they're not telling them, okay, on this date at this time at 3:00 in the morning, we're going to attack Americans at this position. I'm not even sure that Shia militia groups have got that level of dexterity or that level of precision with what they're doing. And again, that target was well outside, was hundreds of miles away of where those Shia militia groups were. That's just why it was a drone, because it's pretty hard to send a drone from a couple hundred miles away and basically hit a tent in the middle of the desert.
Let's get to a part two. This was, again, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, this time on CNN.
And to defend our troops, that's what he's going to continue to do going forward.
You said it's just the beginning, and I just want to clarify. That means that there will be more strikes coming in the next few days?
What it means is that we will take further action. I'm not going to obviously describe the character of that action because I don't want to telegraph our punches, but there will be further action.
Inside Iran, would you rule that out at this point?
Look, sitting on a national TV program, I'm not going to rule in and rule out any activity anywhere. What I am going to say is that the president will do what he thinks needs to be done, and again, reinforce the point that he's going to defend our forces, and also that he is not looking to get into a war.
Well, he may not be looking to get into a war, but as I have argued, Major, the war is here. Iran is at war with us, even if we have yet to figure out we're at war with Iran. Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. But to this point, the question that Dana Bash was asking on CNN, well, I cannot envision the situation in which Joe Biden has the resolve to put an end to the Ayatollah, the mullahs, the hardliners, the clerics, and let's start calling Iran Persia again and engage some trade and see a free world. Is there any position that is taken by the U.S. military to say the next hit is on Tehran and hard?
I think that it's significant if that's the case. I'm sure we have targets there we can always go after. Perhaps if we get proof that cruise missiles leave Iranian territory and hit American forces and have a mass casualty event, I mean, that would maybe be a scenario that would happen. But again, that is a very big step up with regard to escalation. And, we wouldn't, if we go to war with Iran, we're not winning anything from the sky. I mean, what does that even mean? I mean, we're having a hard enough time trying to fend off the Houthis and, keeping them at bay in the Red Sea. So I think that's all part of this situation. That no one wants to, they don't want to either. The Iranians want the United States out, that's for sure. Diplomacy has clearly failed there, but we just at this point need to get them to stop attacking Americans on the ground.
Well, that's That's not going to stop if they feel that it's a stratagem that provides them some level of value. And certainly they can argue that the killing of 3 Americans provides them some value. No?
Yeah, and it's how they operate. It's 1,000 cuts. It's they start with this kind of this low grade retro irregular warfare is what they do, and we respond conventionally. But again, if it can tip over somehow there in the Middle East, if it can tip, so for example, the Kurds still remain an enemy of the Iranians as well. They're considered separatists. The Iranians have attacked them over the past 3 months. The Iranians have problems on all their borders, their southern borders, in Baluchistan. You saw them attack into Pakistan, separatist groups there. So just, conflict is the nature of the Middle East, and that's why the United States is going to continue to be there, at least to try to contain it, keep it in a sandbox, and unfortunately, commanders are going to expect losses at times.
Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. There is more to get to. I'm Tony Katz, and this is Tony Katz Today.